Hi guys, my name is Anil and I'm Director Engineering for Jibe Mobile. We are based out of Mountain View, California, and I'll talk about one of our product platforms, which is Jibe Hub, which essentially allows RCS interop. Just before I continue, could you guys tell me how many of you have heard RCS as application suite or RCS standard? Okay, then it seems like nobody, so I'll just talk about it briefly as well. So in the next 30 minutes, my objective is to cover a little bit about Jibe in probably a few seconds, and then we'll spend a few minutes in terms of RCS, what kind of problem RCS is trying to solve, and in turn, what kind of new problems which come up. How those problems are being solved by our product, which is the RCS Hub, and what's so special about our Jibe RCS Hub, as well as delve a little bit into details of what makes RCS Hub with regards to the SIP proxy and other proxies, as well as application layer changes, and some of the design principles behind it. Okay, so Jibe Mobile is founded in 2006. We have offices in Mountain View, California, where it's headquartered. That's where most of the server-side engineering is. We also have offices in London, as well as Düsseldorf in Germany, where most of our client team is based out of. Jibe Mobile has been a pioneer during the initial days of RCS and has been instrumental in drafting earlier versions of RCS spec. RCS standard is something which is owned by GSMA. So GSMA, as an institution, defines the standard, and whenever we use the term RCS, it's not something which we drafted, but essentially a suite of products which are drafted and implemented based on RCS specifications by GSMA. Jibe Mobile provides various facets of RCS, including the server-side infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, as well as the client implementations, and now is the latest one, which is the hub, which actually allows you to do the interconnect and solve the interconnect problems. More details are at www.jibemobile.com. Okay, RCS. So what exactly is RCS? So there are lots of abbreviations which stand for. Some call it Rich Communication Services, some call it Rich Communication Suite, as well as some call it Rich Content Services. We just like Rich Communication Services. But essentially, it's a set of services which are over IP. An example would be, the way I say it, that it's a natural evolution from an SMS to RCS suite. And essentially, if you see a typical SMS client, instead of SMS client, you can actually end up having audio, video messaging. You can have text messaging. You can have location share. You can do file transfer, which replaces MMS. You can have location share, and but this is just a set of existing applications. But moving down the line, there could be new value-added services which would be evolving, like presence, like rich presence, and some new services which will naturally evolve based on how things turn out. RCS primarily is MNO driven. MNO is mobile network operator / carrier. Same term. The services are intended to be provided by the carrier. These are not something normal, and we call it typically as a cloud, and we'll use the term a little bit further. But RCS is something which has evolved based on very strong foundation of something called as IMS. IMS is a suite of application services, which is IP multimedia systems. It's all based on SIP in terms of signaling, and the media is based on RTP or MSRP for text or video. These are all standards-based, as I mentioned before, and they are essentially the evolution of SMS and MMS to the RCS services. The key here is that, as an example, like there are lots of messaging providers like Skype, there's WhatsApp. The biggest problem is that each one of those are an island by itself. So a Skype user cannot talk to a WhatsApp user unless you install a Skype application or other OTT application. Whereas RCS as a standard, since it's a GSMA-based standard, is just a specification. Anybody can implement the infrastructure based on the compliance standards, as well as the client. So essentially, an RCS client implemented by Jibe Mobile can seamlessly talk to an RCS client which might be developed by a regular developer or another organization. Not only that, RCS also has provisions. They have defined new set of standards for open-ended APIs, which definitely would, moving forward, allow you to interact with some other OTT players as well. So an OTT player, so there are clients which are hybrid in nature, which are OTT player as well as an RCS integrated as well. Since RCS is MNO driven, it brings a separate set of issues, which we'll talk in next few slides. But before going into that, let me talk for a couple of minutes in terms of what the issues, which have, this is not a new problem. This is something which has played in the past as well. Example is the SMS. When originally SMS was introduced, there was, SMS is another one of the MNO-driven services. And there was a lot of work which was done by GSMA, and prior to 2006, every single MNO, if you wanted to send an SMS to your friend who is on a different carrier, the carriers needed to have an interconnect exchange agreement before the content could be shared. Unfortunately, that essentially meant that your reach, your social graph is very limited, and it's totally based on how the two MNOs have agreed upon in terms of the SMS exchange, in terms of the cost, in terms of who owns the delivery, in terms of how do you ensure that there are enough restrictions. All that was solved in 2006 by the introduction of something called as SMS hub providers. So nowadays, SMS hub providers are the ones which essentially own the delivery and any other value-added services with regards to SMS delivery. They own, as an operator, I have only one agreement with one SMS provider, and that's where the integration happens. And all the other facets of integrating with every N other operators is something which is taken over by the hub provider. This allows the MNO to focus on its core business versus working on how this whole agreement, end-to-end agreement, which could be very timely and cost-consuming and very difficult to maintain. So this problem has been solved, and since then there has been lots of hub providers, and SMS had worked very well in between operators who didn't actually have any agreement in between themselves, but through the hub provider.
I have a question.
Yes?
I mean, not about SMS, but why do we need yet another standard other than it being MNO driven? I mean, like we have XMPP, for instance, can do probably everything you're describing. Why not just use that?
XMPP is definitely one of the standards, but if you look at some of the standards in terms of chat and voice and video, XMPP doesn't necessarily support all of those.
I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it does.
Maybe.
So SIP, right? SIP allows passing the messages.
SIP allows a pass-through. But if you go through the XMPP, I don't know enough about XMPP as an open standard in terms of what's the reason why it hasn't been widely adopted by each and every organization today. But I can definitely tell you that GSMA standards are primarily based on whatever is available today and what other services which might be available tomorrow. XMPP is not a GSMA standard. GSMA standards are based on the on top of IMS. The biggest value which RCS provides is that it's actually building up on top of IMS. IMS is something which the carriers have heavily invested already. The IMS infrastructure is available in the carriers today, and it has been there for lots of years. This is just something which hasn't come out into the market because of certain issues with regards to the adoption, inter-exchange between the MNOs. So the RCS is essentially a consortium which, through the GSMA, came up as a natural evolution from IMS. Now, why IMS came in and not XMPP, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the timing was they were probably at the same time existing.
Okay.
So if you go with RCS launches, I mean, this is a typical example of how the same problem like MMS. If you have 4 operators who are talking to each other, you will have M squared, almost M squared number of connections and inter-exchange agreements which you would need, which is first of all, it's very time consuming, and secondly, these are not very scalable. So essentially the standards, most of the times, MNOs are very country specific. So there would be one in Spain and one in Germany. So international agreements essentially need some work. That's where we believe that if RCS Hub comes into picture, RCS Hub can solve this problem of exchange and ensure that multiple MNOs, it can essentially help in quicker adoption of standards-based RC services. So in this particular example, there's a RCS IMS SVG / SPC is essentially the gateway which is used by a provider, by a MNO to do inter-carrier exchange of messages. This is one example of how a Jibe RCS Hub, if it comes into picture, can actually solve the problem of interconnect. So Jibe RCS Hub can essentially take care of implementing the NNI aspects, which essentially are again driven by GSMA. GSMA defines the NNI standards, and RCS Hub implements those standards and can talk to various MNOs, SVGs. That essentially solves the problem of, okay, individual users of MNOs can talk to the ones who have agreed upon Jibe RCS Hub agreement, but what about the users who are not on these MNOs? Your social graph essentially doesn't necessarily always can be mapped to just these individual MNOs. You might have friends who are not on any one of these MNOs. To solve that problem, Jibe also provides something called as a public cloud. Public cloud is our RCS implementation of the services infrastructure. So we do provide public cloud and publicly accessible clients, which you can download and essentially talk to any of these MNO users who are using their native RCS clients. So these are the clients which you can download today from Google Play or Apple App Store. Apart from that, what Jibe RCS Hub provides in terms of the value is that it gives you a single NNI point for all the MNOs. So you can, as an MNO, you can focus more on your core business versus worrying about the NNI. And as the NNI standard evolves, we will be the one who will be actually implementing the standard and ensuring that your investment in existing IMS infrastructure is kept safe. We also, even though they're all standards-based, but we all know there are small issues which are always there in terms of inter-exchange of just by sheer nature of that there are different vendors. Each one of these MNOs providers use, which could be any of the infrastructure providers. Jibe RCS Hub essentially makes sure that it harmonizes the traffic. It takes care of the complexity in terms of header manipulation, making sure that the byte stream restrictions are there, if there are any, based on your services. RCS Hub looks just like one box, but we'll go a little bit further and show you that essentially each one of these endpoints has its own dedicated infrastructure.
Sorry, another question.
Yes.
Are you going to offer end user connectivity? So
We do. In Jibe Cloud, through the public Jibe Cloud.
And that's what, like a per usage sort of thing? Like I send 6 text messages over RCS, you're going to charge me like the APIs?
That's free.
It's free.
Just download it. You can do that now.
So when the MNOs...
But why would you do that is the first question, right?
I have lots of reasons why.
Okay, good.
But I mean, what you're suggesting is that like, okay, let's say I want to send someone an SMS now. There's a cost involved, right? I have to find someone who's going to resell me SMS functionality. They're passing it on somewhere. You're saying RCS is going to be free with APIs?
I think we were talking about 2 separate things. One is RCS Jibe Cloud. So ignore the hub aspect for a second. You're talking about just the pure RCS services as such. Yes, the RCS Hub services over public cloud, they are free right now. So essentially, it needs downloading of an app. And then you can talk to another person who is an RCS user, which could be another user like you who has just downloaded an app. Or it could be a user of one of these MNOs who is using the native client to talk to you.
But it's an app. Your integration.
For us, it's an app.
Okay.
For an MNO provided infrastructure, that's where the value-added service comes into picture. It could be a native device. So going to RCS, there's some slides which will help you understand. But essentially, the next generation of clients coming in from various manufacturers like Samsung, Sony, etc. They have RCS stack built into the device. So over there, as a user, when you buy a new device, in your native address book, you go over there, behind the scene, it will use RCS services to find out what are their capabilities, what's your friend's capabilities, and allow you to use those applications right away. You don't need to download a client. You can use it right through the native interface. That's the direction the carriers are going. That's the direction where the equipment vendors are going, since they're all signed up into the RCS spec.
Are you considering reselling sort of NMI sort of services to end users as through APIs? Because like let's say I have someone on Sprint, I want to send them a text message through RCS. I don't want to get an agreement with Sprint. Is that in your business model?
As a developer, yes, there is that's actually the next slide.
Okay. Right.
That's next. Yeah.
May I have also one question?
Yes.
Is RCS the only attempt to standardize the interoperation between these all sort of clouds?
Yes, it's a natural evolution. This is GSMA driven.
But it's only one effort. They are not trying different technologies. It's only
No,
RCS.
I think it's based out of an already established infrastructure standard, which has been in agreement between equipment vendors for a long time, which is IMS. So it's actually on top of IMS, the RCS, which essentially reduces. So one of the reasons why IMS wasn't widely adopted was because of it's actually simplification of IMS standards so that actually wider group of companies can adopt it. Yes, but this is, as far as I know, there's only one standard.
Okay.
Okay. So this is, of course, as a user, you can use Jibe RCS Hub, or it could be another MNOs Jibe provided hub. Okay. 10 minutes. So just to answer your question, this is another example that Jibe provides a couple of gateways today, which you can use to integrate. So it's not something in the future, it's available today. So there's a set of REST APIs. And again, the difference between us and Skype or any other provider who's giving you these APIs is that these are not our APIs, this is not our island. This is a GSMA published APIs. So when I'm implementing those APIs, you might work against it, but that doesn't necessarily bind you in a law with me as a provider. You can actually use those APIs, your client, to talk to any other implementation or any other infrastructure provider, as long as that supports that particular GSMA API standards.
Does anybody else offer it though?
Sorry, what?
Are there any other offerings for that kind of gateway?
There's new ones evolving. There are new standards coming in. They're new standards, but I know there's a web REST gateway, which is called Jibe Web Gateway, I believe.
No, I mean another provider other than Jibe.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there are quite a few.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
All right.
I don't know, a lot. I'm
I know it's a
engineering,
good question.
but in terms
Vendors. Never mind.
Well, no, but you can find out from open documentation. I mean, it's public knowledge. I mean, just go into GSMA site and see who are the actual people who have signed up to it or who have actually products which are certified. The key is the certification. You don't want to code against a particular provider unless they are GSMA certified. So OTT, so the APIs are of course there, and then yes, through using those APIs, you can interact through RCS Hub using NNI to essentially talk to multiple MNOs and their native devices.
So just a question, just a comparative question. So companies like Cineverse and Sybase, how do they relate to this and not relate to this and the work that they do?
I don't know enough about those two
Okay.
to cite.
Yeah, no problem.
Can't really answer.
Yeah.
But I can find out more after
Yeah, no
this.
problem. Yeah.
Okay, so when we implemented the hub, so the few things which we had to make sure, so a little bit more into technical side, next few minutes. One thing we wanted to make sure that since we are talking to the carrier grade infrastructure here, so we wanted to make sure that the infrastructure is dedicated and is enterprise grade in terms of availability, in terms of scalability, as well as in terms of the deployment model. So ensure, and of course, last but not the least, it's highly performant. To keep that in mind, what we have done is all the endpoints are dedicated, all the endpoints are highly available, and Hub inherently is quite stateless. Of course, there is some state awareness, especially from the media perspective, to make sure that it actually is allocated appropriately. But in a nutshell, we can say that Hub is pretty much a stateless server. The objective was also that if we are using a particular infrastructure, we start something small from a carrier perspective, that they think that, okay, this is the kind of volume they're expecting in this year, but if the application is hugely successful and suddenly the volume explodes, we wanted to make sure that the individual links are upgradable and they do not make any other link to any other MNO provider be interdependent. So these are all individual connections. Needless to say, we wanted to do the volume hiding because we don't want to expose unnecessary information across the wire. We wanted to normalize the traffic, massage the headers to make sure that they are in compliance with the existing providers, existing MNOs infrastructure. We wanted it to be fast. I'll explain to you in the next picture a little bit. But essentially, Hub is not directly user accessible. It comes through the infrastructure. So the crypto terminates at the user infrastructure. All the communication inside is not encrypted. The idea is just for the performance sake. And since how do you ensure the traffic is safe? Is essentially through the VPNs. So you have VPN agreements. Having said that, doesn't mean that we can't do TLS or SSR, whatever needs to be done. It's just that that's one of the design principles we used for performance. This is one example where if you have, so this essentially is Jibe Hub, which is made up of multiple SPGs. An SPG, the session for a gateway, is per cloud. So either per cloud per se, or it could be per MNO. And if you see this particular model on the top, Jibe Public Cloud and Jibe Private Clouds are in this picture as an example, are in the same data center, so there is no need of VPN as such. But if they are connecting to an MNO provider where you have accessing some kind of information or connecting to their SPC, you essentially go through the VPN. That's how you will ensure the security. Oh, sorry. Okay, moving forward quickly. In my presentation, there are some more details if you guys want to go through those. but I want to quickly cover a few key points that we use Tellurize to ensure that the domain doesn't come into, doesn't conflict. This is quick details in terms of what's inside the box. Inside the box of a typical SVG for the hub is a SIP proxy, which is OpenSIPS. We also have MSRP proxy, which is quite stateless, but has some knowledge due to is MSRP aware. And of course, we have an RTP proxy for the audio video. When the SVGs are talk to the MNO, we essentially ensure that the media is terminated at an SVG level. So SVC, MNO always has connections coming from SVG. It shapes the messages. Those are all as part of the SIP proxy, which we're using. We also have a route director. I'll quickly cover that in a second. This is a deployment model. It's highly available SVGs through the load balancer. Right now, you can use any kind of load balancer depending on what your requirements are. There's no interdependencies for a load balancer. The dialogues terminate at a particular SVG. We're not replicating the dialogues here. This is one example of, in terms of how do you identify where, since hub is a interconnect, way to route a request which comes in. If a request comes in based on the NIST, since it's a Jibe product, so we have special integrations with Jibe Cloud. So we always know whether the user belongs to Jibe Cloud infrastructure, or is it, if it doesn't belong to Jibe Cloud infrastructure, we probe through our route director to find out where this subscriber belongs to. The route director, in turn, can check through the GSMA Pathfinder APIs to find out if this user belongs to which provider. Or if it finds that it belongs to this user, then it will intelligently cache the subscriber's home IMS with a TTL to ensure that next time when we go, when we're looking for the subscriber's home IMS or RCS server, that we don't do the unnecessary API calls. And if it's not there, then it will, if it's a subscriber belongs to a particular carrier, then we'll probe that carrier through SIP options and other things, and intelligently cache the TTL base. So essentially, this is a quick summary of what we just talked about. So we have a Jibe private cloud, which an MNO can buy Jibe infrastructure, or they can actually have their own infrastructure, which is the carrier cloud. People could be using the native clients on Jibe private cloud, or they can actually download our clients on Jibe public cloud, or they can be using the native devices on carriers' own cloud. And through RCS Hub, we can actually make interchange so that a person can use these audio, video, file transfer, presence, location share services today, irrespective of which MNO you belong to. One special thank you to OpenSIPS. We started using OpenSIPS almost like three to 4 years ago when we implemented our cloud infrastructure first. Jibe, and right now in all our deployments, we are exclusively using OpenSIPS for SIP proxy. Well, some of the reasons I've mentioned over here, and some of these have already been covered, so I won't go through them again. But one thing I wanted to especially say is that we are live. We're using OpenSIPS live in a production environment, and we had some issues, and Bogdan and his team came out of their way to apply some or give us some patches, which was very, very appreciated, especially from an open source community. And we totally understand it's not your full-time job, commercial full-time job as such. But yeah, it was very, very, very helpful. Okay, there are some references in the presentation, and Bogdan, I'll share these presentation with you so you can post it so people need more details. That's pretty much it. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Can I use your client to send messages to cell phones?
Yes, absolutely.
Free?
Yes. Free in the sense depends on, yes. There's a couple of clients which are available, and yes, we do use SMS providers. It's called Jibe messaging to us or something in
So if
Google
I
or
want to
in
offer my customers texting to the cell phones, I can use APIs.
This, of course, we have checks and balances in place. Otherwise, to make sure that, so that we don't, So there are some checks and balances in place, but if you want those to be avoided, I mean, you can definitely talk to somebody. Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys.